Okay, so let's dive in. We're pulling apart a really interesting document today. It's an article from Brand South Africa. They're the official custodians of the country's brand image.
Hmm.
And it zeroes in on South Africa's economic transformation agenda, specifically the broad-based Black Economic Empowerment Policy, B-BBEE as it's known.
Right. And this piece, it seems it's directly tackling some of the, let's say, international chatter around B-BBEE, including points that came up with U.S. stakeholders, even former President Trump.
Exactly. Questions about how this policy actually applies to investors, coming from outside South Africa.
So our mission for this deep dive is really to get inside this specific source. What does Brand South Africa in this article say B-BBEE actually is?
Yeah, and how do they argue it works for non-South African companies?
And maybe most importantly, why do they frame it the way they do? Not as a barrier, but as something essential,
Inclusive, even.
necessary.
It's fascinating framing. The article kicks off by positioning South Africa's economy as, well, fundamentally open, committed to global partnerships. That's the baseline.
But with a clear condition.
Right. The article states pretty plainly that any economic engagement has to happen within South Africa's laws, and that includes this transformation agenda.
And they call this whole framework an invitation, which is quite a deliberate word choice, not a restriction, an invitation.
Definitely deliberate. So let's unpack what this source says B-BBEE is. It seems to anticipate a key question right off the bat.
Which is?
Is B-BBEE just a racial policy?
Ah, okay. And the article's answer.
It's a very direct no. Explicitly states it is not a racial policy.
Okay, so if it's not that, what does the source say it is?
It defines it as, let's see, a constitutionally grounded framework and economically necessary for
Yeah.
transformation.
Right, and the goals outlined are pretty broad, aren't they? It talks about undoing centuries of exclusion.
Yes, unlocking the full potential of all South Africans. Providing pathways, it says, for people who were historically marginalized.
Ensuring access to opportunity. Building a more, inclusive and resilient economy for the future. That seems to be the core idea presented here.
Exactly. It's framed as something foundational for the country's future. And the article also mentions B-BBEE is flexible and benchmarked against global standards for inclusion.
That flexibility piece seems key, especially when they turn to international investors. The source acknowledges that multinational companies can face, well, real structural hurdles.
Hurdles like?
Specifically around things like direct equity transfers, selling off shares, basically. That's one way local companies might meet B-BBEE ownership goals, but it can be tricky or sometimes impossible for a global corporation structure.
Okay, right. So this is where the article brings in a specific solution, isn't it, for those companies?
Exactly. It highlights something called the Equity Equivalent Investment Program, the EEIP.
EEIP.
And the article describes this as an internationally unique mechanism designed specifically for these multinational corporations.
So it lets them meet the B-BBEE ownership goals without selling shares. How does that work then, according to the source?
Instead of equity sales, it's about making impactful local investments.
Ah, okay. What kind of investments?
The article lists a few types, things like skills development, enterprise creation, and it specifically calls out supporting Black-owned SMMEs, small, medium, micro enterprises.
Which are vital for job creation, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And also broader socioeconomic upliftment projects.
Got it. And the article seems pretty careful about how it positions this EEIP, right? It's not presented as some kind of easy way out, a loophole.
Not at all. The source is very clear on that. It frames the EEIP not as a way to sidestep the development goals, but as a, quote, structured strategic vehicle.
A vehicle.
Yeah, a vehicle designed to enable, quote, meaningful and measurable transformation just through a different pathway, one suited to multinationals.
Okay, that makes sense. Which I guess leads us nicely into the next bit of the article where they try to show this isn't just theory. They give examples. They basically say, look, this works.
Yes, exactly. They use some big names as proof points. Microsoft, for example.
What did Microsoft do, according to the article?
They committed R$1.32 billion. And the source specifies this money went toward Black-owned SMMEs developing skills for the fourth industrial revolution, 4IR stuff like AI, tech skills.
Right, hedge-focused skills.
And also R&D initiatives that line up with South Africa's national goals.
Our $1.32 billion is not insignificant. Who else do they mention?
Amazon Web Services, AWS. They're cited for investing R$365 million, specifically to support 47 Black-owned software companies, helping accelerate digital transformation in the country.
Okay.
Then there's Caterpillar. The article notes they undertook what it calls the largest EEIP on record, a R1.3 billion localization commitment.
Wow, localization. So focusing on local supply chains and production, presumably?
That seems to be the implication, and JP Morgan gets a mention too.
As the first global investment bank involved in an EEIP.
That's what the article says, yeah. Deploying R$340 million for small business development and job creation. And IBM is included as well.
For what?
Supporting digital skills training for local entrepreneurs, which the article links to boosting South Africa's innovation ecosystem.
So quite a range of sectors: tech, finance, heavy industry.
Definitely. And it doesn't stop there. The article also points to the big multinational car manufacturers. Volkswagen, Mercedes-Benz, BMW, Toyota, Ford.
What about them?
It highlights their sort of consistent long-term commitment to localization, job creation, and developing local enterprises within South Africa.
Okay, so the article uses all these examples to make a broader point then.
Absolutely. The core argument here,
Right.
based on these examples, is that it's entirely possible for companies to be commercially successful while also actively contributing to South Africa's constitutional vision and its development goals.
So the message they're pushing is that economic growth and this kind of inclusive transformation, they aren't opposites. In fact, they can work together.
Exactly. The source presents them as mutually reinforcing in the South African context.
Right.
And it goes further. It frames respecting local laws, including the transformation agenda, not as some kind of burden you have to grudgingly accept, but as the fundamental basis for credible, responsible, and crucially sustainable investment. It's presented as just, well, the smart way to do business long-term in the country.
Which loops us back neatly to that opening idea, framing the whole transformation thing as an invitation.
Right. And the article circles back to explain what that invitation really means from its perspective.
And what is that?
It's framed as an invitation to be an active participant, to help build a more inclusive, equitable, and resilient society within South Africa.
Okay.
And the article connects this directly to that very famous line from the Freedom Charter.
South Africa belongs to all who live in it.
That's the one. And the article argues that line isn't just, symbolic.
How does it interpret it here?
From the source's viewpoint, it implies a shared commitment, a commitment to the transformation agenda, driven by an awareness of the history, the legacies of colonialism and apartheid.
So it's saying that playing a part in shaping a more just future isn't just for South Africans, but for anyone involved economically.
That's the argument being made, yes. That everyone who lives in, invests in, or trades with South Africa has a role.
So it paints this picture where engaging with B-BBEE, with the whole transformation agenda, it's not just ticking boxes on a policy document.
No, it's presented as being part of a larger national project, something with deep historical roots and a very clear future focus.
Right.
And that leads to the article's final takeaway point. It argues that when transformation is embraced genuinely, sincerely, it stops being seen as a hurdle.
It becomes
a catalyst. A catalyst, the source says, for long-term opportunity, for shared prosperity, and for sustainable growth.
It's a strong concluding argument.
And it ends with this really powerful distinction. It says, those who understand this aren't just putting money into a market. They're investing in a nation. A nation, it says, with purpose, potential, and principle.
A nation with purpose, potential, and principle. Okay, that's quite the statement to end on from Brand South Africa. So just to quickly recap this deep dive into their article, we've seen how it positions B-BBEE, not racial, but a core constitutionally rooted transformation policy.
Right. And we looked at the EIP, the Equity Equivalent Investment Program, as the specific mechanism highlighted for international investors to participate in a meaningful way.
And the article provides those concrete company examples, Microsoft, AWS, Caterpillar, the car makers, to argue that this model is practical, that it works on the ground.
And the overarching message from this source is pretty clear. Doing business in South Africa can, and perhaps should, be both commercially rewarding and socially valuable. It's about blending growth with that transformation imperative.
Absolutely. So for you, the listener, drawing from this source material, here's a thought to maybe chew on.
Go on.
If, as this Brand South Africa article suggests, embracing a nation's specific transformation agenda is akin to investing in a nation with purpose, potential, and principle, what might that imply more broadly about the nature of global business today and maybe its responsibilities or even opportunities when it operates in societies that are actively working through complex historical legacies?
That's definitely something worth thinking about. The role of investment beyond just the bottom line.
Indeed. Something to mull over.